All right, Shalom. I want to start off by giving our praise, honor, and glory due to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakakwadash. I'd like to give double honors unto the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, who I learned this truth from, and I'd like to say peace and salutations unto the hopefully elect. And today, it's going to be a quick lesson on this clip that I came across earlier, where a, so-called black woman, she took out her son, which it just goes to show you that, we are still up under the curses, and also, the cruelty of the Negro woman, which I just may entitle it that, man, but is madness. And when she was in court, she was chanting, God is dead, which we know the Heavenly Father is, alive and well, because he is. He's forever, man. The Heavenly Father, he doesn't die, but she's clearly bugging because, she has demons on her and, she killed her son. So I'm just going to play this clip and bring out a couple scriptures. Lord willing, this lesson is edifying, straight to the point. Let's play it.
3.
God is dead! 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 God is dead!
3.
God is dead! 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 God is dead!
3.
So you see her, 9 times out of 10, if she isn't bugged out, which she is, ma'am. And even gonna try to give her the benefit of the doubt, but man, if she isn't doing that on purpose to try to, claim insanity, because people will try to do that just so they can get sent to, a mental health institution instead of prison, But it says disturbing woman accused of killing her 5-year-old son and hiding him in storm drain after he snuck snacks into his bed, shouts God is dead during court appearance. So here's the caption. And the clip that I just featured, it is being used for educational purposes only. I'm not making any money off of anyone else's content, man. So fair use, fair use, fair use. It says, a woman accused of killing a 5-year-old seemingly had a mental health outburst in court. According to reports, Pammy May appeared in Franklin County Court last Friday for a hearing to decide whether she would accept or decline a plea agreement. After being brought into the courtroom, May began shouting, God is dead, God is dead, and had to be escorted out. May ultimately rejected the plea deal, and her trial is scheduled to begin on November 9th. May is being charged with aggravated murder, abuse of a corpse, and 3 counts of tampering with evidence after she allegedly strangled 5-year-old Darnell Taylor to death. She was Taylor's legal guardian, so Salakia wasn't her birth son, but she was his guardian. Says police issued an Amber Alert after May's husband called 911 and said his wife woke him up and told him she had harmed the child. She was later arrested after someone reported seeing a woman walking suspiciously around the building. Authorities said May later provided information that led them to Taylor's body, which was found in a storm drain. She told investigators that the incident happened after she became angry when she caught Darnell sneaking snacks into his bed. Like, come on, yo. It just goes to show you the cruelty of the Negro woman. He's 5, kids do that. Even when I was a child, I did that. You would sneak snacks, but you know what I'm saying? It's not even that serious, but it just goes to show you that, you women, certain of you women, you aren't meant to be mothers, and this is why. because you're not fit, to properly take care of a child, man. You know, and straight madness, which at the end of the day is judgment. It's sad, but it is judgment at the end of the day. There's no telling what that little man did, to deserve, that death. But either way it goes, he paid for something that he did from a past life, and the Lord just happened to have that woman carry it out, you know. So I'm going to start with this actually. Let's spell check, man. It's lucky. Start with the book of Proverbs. Oh, it's lucky, not Proverbs. Actually, Psalms chapter 14 and verse 1. It says, "To the chief musician, a psalm of David. The fool hath said in his heart, there is no God. They are corrupt. They have done abominable works. There is none that doeth good and right." And even though it says, in his heart, we know that this can apply to you women too, because again, she was chanting that God is dead when clearly, that's, an atheistic belief, because I remember seeing that documentary, or if it wasn't a documentary, a movie, some time ago. I don't remember if I watched it on my own or if they showed it, while I was in school, but I remember seeing that documentary, God is dead. He had just madness, man. I don't remember exactly, what all was said in that documentary, but just madness, man. But she's a fool, because essentially you're saying that there is no God when clearly that's not the case. Again, the Heavenly Father, he is, that's his name, Yahweh. He is, he to be, he exists, The Heavenly Father is the Father of spirits, man. So obviously, he's not going anywhere, He always was. But let's get to the curses, man, because again, this goes to show you, the cruelty of the Negro woman, not the Israelite woman, the Judite woman, those sisters, that, have repented, that are doing, the best they can to stay in order, but the Negro woman, you can't be classified as Israelites until you perish first, man, because a lot of you aren't right, man, and you're not going to make it. So just the book of Deuteronomy chapter 28 and verse 56. It says, "The tender and delicate woman among you, which will not adventure to set the sole of her foot upon the ground for delicateness and tenderness. Her eyes shall be evil toward the husband of her bosom, and toward her son, and toward her daughter." Even though that wasn't her biological son, she still had an evil eye toward him, right? Verse 57, it says, "And toward her young one that cometh out from between her feet, and toward her children which she shall bear. For she shall eat them for one of all things secretly in the siege and straitness, wherewith thine enemies shall distress thee in thy gates." And right, the point being is in verse 56, where it says what? The woman is going to have an evil eye toward her son. And even though, again, that wasn't her biological son, she was his legal guardian, but she still, killed that young boy. She strangled him just for sneaking snacks. Again, he's just a kid. Like, come on, man. That's crazy, But this is how you know that we're the Israelites, because again, yeah, you have Edomites that, literally take out their entire family, but these curses don't apply to them, they apply to us. So let me get that in the book of Lamentations chapter 4 and verse 3, it says, even the sea monsters draw out the breasts. They give suck to their young ones. The daughter of my people has become cruel, like the ostriches in the wilderness. And right, it even gives the analogy in the book of Job how an ostrich will bury her eggs, and forget where she buried them and end up trampling over them, and smashing them, right? And that's what the Israelite woman, in particular, the so-called black woman, the ones that aren't right, they're being compared to an ostrich because, again, they are cruel. This woman literally strangled a 5-year-old boy for sneaking snacks in his bed. There's other ways you could have disciplined him. You could have, gave him a whooping, or it's different ways you could have went about that. But at the end of the day, it was judgment. Because just like it says, even the sea monsters draw out the breasts. So all the different sea life, sharks, whales, they all draw out the breast. They care for their young, but the Negro woman in particular, she doesn't care. This is the book of Job, chapter 4 and verse 7, and it says, remember, I pray thee, whoever perished being innocent, or where were the righteous cut off? Excuse me, Slakia. And right, that young boy, he wasn't innocent, because at the end of the day, just like it says in Romans 3 and 23, all have fallen short of the glory of the Lord. We have all fell short. We have all sinned. But, us that are in this truth, we're doing the best we can to offend less because, again, we commit sins every day, and we're just hoping that, us doing this work, that it is acceptable to the Lord, But the point being is that, we all sinned, so therefore none of us are truly innocent. Now, the elect will be blameless, but none of us are innocent. Why? Because, again, we all have sinned, and we still do sin because we're subject to it, through these bodies that we're in, But at the end of the day, the young boy, he was, paid back for something he did from a past life. So he may have, lived a full life from a previous life, nothing happened, then came back in this particular time, just to be taken out, by the Negro woman, his legal guardian, now where's his birth mother, his birth parents, who knows? He could have been adopted, anything could have happened, as far as that situation goes, but hey, it's still pretty crazy, man. It's still messed up, but it's judgment. I'm going to end it with this. It's the book of Matthew, chapter 24, and verse 12, and it says, and because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold, and right, things like this are going to become more and more common, especially when all hell breaks loose. During the time of Jacob's trouble, a lot of women and children, they're going to be, put down in various fashions, man. So that's just one instance where you can see, the love of many is waxing cold, because any, women, they have that natural, affection, they love children, obviously, in this time, we're living in, that isn't the case for the majority of these women out here, but any woman in her right mind, she loves children, she loves to be a nurturer, but clearly, that one, she had those spirits on her, man. She had demons on her. I wouldn't be surprised if Legion, was on her once she was chanting that, but, who knows? But either way, the young boy is judged, and, she is going to be judged. So, Lord willing, this lesson was edifying. I want to give all praise, honor, and glory due to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakakodash. I'd like to give double honors unto the apostles and the artists of great millstone who I learned this truth from. And I'd like to say peace and salutations unto the hopefully elect. Till next time I say, Shalom.